just survived almost 10 years in some of the most elite military units, 3 years at war I'd heard about in some, silly barroom chat about going to Africa and running around with a sniper rifle in the bush and protecting animals.
Former Special Forces soldier Damien Mander spent years fighting a war in Iraq, and now he's wandering the African bush with no real plan.
And you come out and you see what these rangers are going through for a very high purpose, perhaps the highest purpose of our time. So there was something there that sparked more inquiry about who are you, Damien, and what's your purpose?
And then one day, out on patrol, something happened that he couldn't walk away from.
Here we saw one of these big, majestic animals with her back foot caught in a wire snare. Then she'd ripped her own pelvis in half, trying to pull that leg out from that wire snare. We had no choice but to euthanize her, and when she was euthanized, she started giving birth to a stillborn calf.
That was the moment that everything changed.
And I just contacted Mum and I said, start selling shit off. Left myself with no option but to make something work. I went to Africa looking for a fight, not a cause, and things soon changed.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of No Ordinary Monday. Thank you so much for joining us. I am your host, Chris Barron, and each week I sit down with a guest to relive their No Ordinary Monday story, an extraordinary event or experience that stands out across their entire career. Like any good story, we'll also explore the path that led them there. We'll see what the job is really like behind the scenes, and by the end, we'll discover the hard-won lessons that they've learned. Now, last week we heard from Brianna Evigan, Hollywood actress turned conservationist, who sold everything and moved to Southern Africa to dedicate her life to protecting the natural world through community-led conservation. This week, we continue that two-part special with her husband, Damien Mander. His path to that same place couldn't have looked more different. A decade in special operations, 3 years at war in Iraq, and when he left the military, he had no idea what came next. What eventually pulled him out was a rumour, a barroom conversation about going to Africa and protecting animals. He went there looking for a fight, and what he found was something worth fighting for. You're listening to No Ordinary Monday. Let's get into the show. Damien, welcome to the podcast, man. How are you doing today?
Chris, how are you, buddy? Thanks, mate. Thanks for having us.
Pretty good. Where are you speaking to us from today?
H-Town, Harare, the capital of Zimbabwe. So I think, what are we, about 6 hours behind you?
Yeah, over in Indo. Lovely. It looks like a gorgeous day. And it's not often everyone I guess come on, they're in an office or some indoor location, but you're in like that beautiful sort of, veranda, trees in the background kind of thing.
Oh, I'm in the office. This is it. Actually back from the field. So being out there amongst nature, that's the office, mate. This is just this is the secondary home for getting shit done.
Oh man, I was going to ask you. I mean, like typical day, there must not be such a thing, right? Sometimes it's doing stuff in the fields. Sometimes what does a typical day look like?
You know what? I've been asked that question a bunch of times over the years, and I've always tried to bullshit through an answer. And I've got to be straight, mate. I'm on the road 9 months a year. I tend to function a little bit well in chaos. And so
nice.
I like to sort of create those chaotic moments around myself of busyness and, look, it can be lunchtime on a Monday and we're knocking off and going for lunch and then working back late that night, or, there's an issue and we've got to jump on a plane and fly somewhere, or, someone's been shot. There's all kinds of scenarios that go on every day when you're working across all these different landscapes. It's not a 9-to-5 job. It was never intended to be. It doesn't feel like a job. It's my purpose. I don't feel like I've been to work since before I joined the military, when I was a garbage can collector back in Melbourne in the 40 degree, or I think that's 100 Fahrenheit for any Yanks watching this, temperature out there chasing a bloody garbage truck through the summer, mate.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is amazing. I love it. It's unpredictable. There's a lot of time on the road, as I was saying, traveling, lecturing, get to travel to projects all across Africa, get to spend time with investors and donors that are passionate about the cause, and of course, experts in the field and the network that we have. So, mate, I couldn't script it any better.
Awesome. Well, I'm really excited to jump into all that and really dive into all the amazing work you guys do at both. Well, you got multiple organizations going on at the moment, and all the field work and the exciting stuff that you're getting up to. But I kind of want to take it and start right back at the beginning at Damien as a kid. I always love guests, like coming on, done big successful stuff. But I always love going back to, what was, did you know what you wanted to be as a kid? What was, growing up like in Melbourne? Did you have a clear picture back then of what you wanted to do and what you wanted to be?
Funny enough, mate, I remember sitting there. I would have probably about 10 years old at school. And you seen on the news every night then, it was Iraq War One. And, all the traces and that going through the air and the tanks. And I just remember being in school and drawing all these, pictures of tanks and soldiers and guns and fighter jets. I suppose at the time it's all glorious and the movies and the shows and the news and all that, and it's glorified. And I suppose in my mind from a young age, I had some sort of adventurous going out there kind of spirit to test the world and see what it had in return. I think, as I went through my teenage years more so, I wanted to be a footballer, Australian footballer. It's a cross between American football, rugby, and cross-country wrestling, and, a flock of seagulls fighting over a potato chip. You mix all that together and you got Aussie rules.
Aussie rules football.
Yeah. I remember, so you're growing up in about an hour south of Melbourne, it gets bloody cold there, next stop Tasmania, then Antarctica. But I'd get up before school every morning and I'd go free diving off the local wharf. And they had the calamari or squid fishermen. They had these lures. They'd be fishing all night under the lights where the squid would come. And I'd go free diving in the morning and collect all those lures and sell them back to the fishermen. $5 each. And, age of 13, 14, 15, 16, you start making
entrepreneur.
$40, $50 a day. It's good money as a kid, right? Yeah. And, there's sort of king there at the tuck shop, the canteen at school, handing out $1 here, loaning $1 here, low interest, by the way. And, I soon realized that, the fishermen can't see what's going on underneath the water. So I could maybe make it a little more attractive for their lures to get lost. So I went and got a bunch of shopping trolleys, stole a bunch of rope off all the scallop fishing charter boats that were there, and created this underwater labyrinth, and business boomed. And, I sort of used that to pay for scuba diving equipment and start doing scuba diving courses. And I was in love with another world, mate, and that was underwater. I spent more time, I reckon, in the water than out of it. Growing up as a kid, I got salt water running through my veins still. And, of course, any kid that's done that, growing up with a love for water, the ultimate job is to be a diver in the Navy. And that was eventually where I ended up.
Oh, no way. So it wasn't like you wanted to be a soldier. It was kind of like, this is a way for me to do the thing that I love and kind of have a role and a job from it as well.
I mean, it's bloody hard, mate, from being a footballer to wanting to do graphic design to getting into university to do graphic design and realizing maybe that's not.
You did?
Yeah, I deferred and eventually ended up at sniper school. So it's quite a vast difference in career choices there. But, you're a kid. They're trying to tell you, 15, 16, trying to tell you what subjects you think you should be doing. So you get into university a couple of years later. So you spend 3 or 4 years there and determine what you do for the next couple of decades of your life. And it's crazy,
Jeez.
Kids, you should be made to travel and go and experience the best classroom that there is. And that's the world. And, I take my kids. I've got 3 kids, another one on the way. I take them traveling as much as I can, because it is the best thing I show them. Different foods, different cultures, different sounds, smells, people, and the art of being able to communicate with nothing better than a smile, nothing more than a smile and good intentions and being able to go anywhere in the world. My oldest kid, Leo, is 12. I think he's been to 28 countries now.
Oh my God.
I'm not going to sit down and give them a PhD in X, Y, or Z, but I can show them the world.
And I guess, going back to your, transitioning into that military, your proper first career, you mentioned being, a bin man in Melbourne back in the day, but I'm guessing jumping into the military was your first career in a sense. And I don't want to sort of dwell too heavily on what you kind of got, but I do want to build a picture of the kind of stuff you got up to, how it shaped you, your mindset at the time, just build us a little bit a picture of that military side of your career.
So at the time, they weren't taking what we call a clearance diver. They weren't taking divers off the street. You had to be in the military already to transfer category across. So I joined. Actually, I heard a radio ad in the car driving to work one day to go and fucking lift another 1 billion bins full of someone else's shit onto a conveyor belt and sort it all out. And I heard an ad to join the Navy as electronics technician. So I thought, I'll do that, get my foot in the door and change over. And then what I didn't know is they really needed electronics technicians there. So I'm in there every day with my divisional officer writing a letter, handwritten letter, requesting transfer of category to be a diver. And it got rejected every day. And eventually I got hauled in front of the commanding officer of HMAS Cerberus down there in Melbourne. It's the biggest training institution in the country for the military. And he said, why do you want to go to dive school? Gave him the spiel, and I was off to dive school. I later went back there to do seamanship training, if you're at sea and there's a fire, all that sort of stuff. And I ran into some of the same staff that were down there a few years later, and they said the only reason we sent you is we thought you'd be straight back, having failed soon after.
Really?
But it's got a pretty high dropout rate. The SEALs have what's called BUDS or Hell Week. Back then we had what was called CDAT, the Clearance Diver Acceptance Test. So when you get when you sign yourself over, you just that first selection phase, you're in for about somewhere between 12 and 14 days of hell, and you're exposed to the 4 pillars of misery: to be hungry, cold, tired, and wet. And at the end of it, 3/4 of the people have dropped out or been disqualified or injured. Not for them. And there was nothing special about me, mate, other than when everyone else said it's too hard or it can't be done, I was either stubborn or stupid. But I was one of those people standing there at the end. Funny actually, and I never obviously spoke about this. So I was an asthmatic when I joined the military.
Oh, really? Huh.
And they don't really like asthmatics in the diving branch for obvious reasons. Having an asthma attack at 89 meters under the water, on some sort of rebreathing dive set with 2 cylinders of extra gas slung under your armpits. It's not really the ideal situation. So I'm doing this, and we've been stripped down. They've inspected everything at the start of this selection course, and I had my Ventolin inhaler in the only place you can hide it, and that's sort of under my under the crown jewels there, and tucked away. And so we're doing this. We had like a 5-hour run, gate to gate run, and 1 billion push-ups, all that sort of stuff. Guys screaming in your face, and I've got this thing bouncing around underneath the tackle there. And we come running down past HMAS Penguin down to the wharf, and there's a dive launch there, and it's like 2:00 in the morning now, and the dive launch takes off at full, this big dive launch comes up and takes off and goes racing out into the ocean, and they're screaming at us. We're in a PT gear, screaming at us like, get in the dive gear. So we no wetsuits or anything, and just putting on this gear, and then they're just in the water to the bottom, go. I'm like, fuck. At what point does a little gas cylinder or Ventolin inhaler explode? And so I'm like, I can either throw this thing away, and there goes my Navy dive career, because if I do have an asthma attack, I'm going to have to put my hand up and say I've got asthma.
Yeah.
I can try and hide it and risk losing my career there by taking it out and hiding it in my bag, and they go through the bags all the time looking for stuff. Or I can leave it under my balls and keep descending. And so I was like, at this stage, I wasn't worried about the pain or the 5 hours of running or the people screaming. I'm just very conscious about what could just
explosive right next to the crown jewels.
And I got my 4th kid on the way, so maybe I should look at something like this now. But back then, I didn't have any children, and so the cylinder didn't explode. I survived. I went on to become.
But it went down with you. It went down. You went in.
Yeah.
Oh, geez, you took it. So, I guess that's a testament to, all right.
Oh, yeah.
Just got to grit it.
That was like day 2. If one of the instructors knew about that, they would have signed me off right there. And they're like, no, this guy's he's in 100%. That's commitment. So, yeah, everything's still in place. Well, actually, every other body part's broken now: the shoulders, knees, elbows, but neck, back, but that's all in place.
Wow. So again, that's just down to the mindset of like being who you are and the dedication to a cause, a mission, a purpose. And I guess translating that to going over to Iraq, like the sort of stuff, very broadly, what you got up to there was like pretty serious, high level stuff, in terms of, I think you described it on other, interviews as like, people playing PlayStation games don't even get close to the kind of stuff you guys were up to.
Yeah. Well, there was a period in between becoming a diver and going to Iraq, and that was September 11, the attacks on New York City and the US, which of course started the war in the Middle East. Australia's reaction to that was to set up a specialist or a special operations unit called Tactical Assault Group East, which was sat under the 2nd Commando Regiment, was made up of divers, commandos, and guys that came across from the SAS, 3 platoons, land, water, and sniper. Naturally, I was a diver, went across to water platoon, and then was told I'm off to do the sniper's course. So did that. Was online there, and then would have been sort of early 2005, deployed to Iraq for what would be the beginning of mostly 3 years over there, give and take some leave periods. But look, I mean, it was all very serious, but it was, I don't know, it's hard to explain. Yes, it's like grown-ups rules with special operations. Everyone's done the training, they've done the selections, they're all through. No one's sort of walking around saluting and I mean, our unit, no one actually had rank on. We were just all in plain clothes. Guys with relaxed grooming and beards and mohawks and all this rough-looking bunch. But it was grown-ups rules. Like, no one's coming and watching over your shoulder and micromanaging it. It's like, this is a job. Let's go and get shit done. Everyone's done the training. We know what to do.
Amazing. So I've got a real clear picture of you now as a kid, and then obviously transitioning into a military career. But I guess after you'd finished your tours in Iraq and finished with the military, there is this very definite, amazing transition you had to a completely different line of work in essence. And I want to start going through that in a way, but I guess what was firstly, what's the thing that triggered it really, that sort of big transition?
Yeah, again, wasn't really a roadmap. It was one of those things. So I was 29 when I left Iraq, almost 29. So I'd built up a real estate portfolio in Australia and Dubai. I'd bought my first house, I think it was just before the age of 21. And by then I had 5 houses in Australia, 2 apartments in Dubai. Didn't own them all outright, had loans for a lot of them, was making really good money in Iraq, tax-free money in US dollars, bringing it back in, transfer into Aussie currency and paying off houses. So I didn't need to work for the foreseeable future. I just survived almost 10 years in some of the most elite military units, 3 years at war, had done well in every aspect that I'd put my mind to. And so anyone that I suppose is in that position, you sort of give yourself a reward. But we actually weren't told about it. We weren't told what to prepare for. So when you leave these units and you leave such a tight-knit group of people that I'll never experience ever again in my life anyway. And I doubt many people on the planet will. I've never seen it replicated in a civilian workplace, what we get to experience in the military and the camaraderie and how close you come together. And when the mission doesn't matter as much as the guy next to you. The guy next to you is the mission. Get each other home in one piece and safe and alive. And, hopefully what the bosses want done along the way also got ticked off. But we were each other's mission. And when that stops and your actual purpose is removed, either just by discharging from the military and everything you trained for and geared for and mentally psyched for, that's no longer there. And you got to try and figure out what to do next in life. And, there's not a bunch of jobs in the local newspaper for snipers. When you get back home, as someone that goes to the US all the time, I'm jumping in Ubers and chatting to people here and there, and the ex-military people, they're trained to shoot someone from a mile away, and now they're flipping burgers or driving someone in an Uber. And it's hard. If we're going to send kids off to fight the arguments of old men, we've got to be ready to pick up the pieces when they come home. And a lot of guys don't transition. And I suppose there was a period for me where I didn't. And that period of not being able to transition led to a downward spiral, a lot of drugs, a lot of alcohol. I spent nearly a year in South America just traveling, and had to get myself out of that so I could try and get some sort of this clear mindset to figure out the what next. And, that mindset was this romantic adventure that I'd heard about in some, silly barroom chat about going to Africa and running around with a sniper rifle in the bush and protecting animals. It's pretty sort of selfish adventure. There was never any good intent behind it. It was about me. It was self-serving. My military career, I joined the military for adventure. I went to Iraq to make money. I went to Africa looking for a fight, not a cause. And things soon changed.
I guess you had this, okay, great. I'm being pointed in a new direction now from South America, because you kind of go, there's a sniff of a something over there in Africa. I don't know whether it's a purpose or a mission, but it's something I can go and do, and it sounds interesting. And then you land in Africa and you get a real sort of, okay, this is a reality of the situation now. Was there kind of a moment where you went, okay, now this is now crystallizing as like, I need to sort of commit myself to this particular path?
Look, it wasn't really all falling into place that quickly. And then I started in South Africa, ended up staying in Cape Town for a number of months, just chilling there and relaxing. There's not a lot of anti-poaching to be done in Cape Town. It'd be like going to Amsterdam for anti-poaching. It's like, oh yeah, Amsterdam, just, working hard. Yeah. So eventually teamed up with a buddy and we went driving around the southern part of the continent. And that's where I started to get out into, the rural areas, the wilderness areas, some of these vast open landscapes that are bigger than small countries, and seeing the rangers, speaking with them, seeing what they were going through. Well, I suppose seeing like the context that I was seeing these rangers, and they spend so much time out there dedicating themselves to looking after the bush and nature, and like just taking it all in, driving for a day through wilderness. And these guys are wandering around that wilderness trying to protect it with fuck all resources. And this is, I'd just come from Iraq. We were working within a $600 billion a year annual defense budget. Anything we wanted, we got, all the fancy tools and all that shit. And, if it's a tank to come and help us get out of a shit situation, or Apache gunships that we needed because things got a bit sticky, all that stuff was close, all coordinated through an op center. And you come out and you see what these rangers are going through for a very high purpose, perhaps the highest purpose of our times. And I say that as a father who want to raise children into a world where there is hope. These rangers do what I still believe is the most important job in the world. And seeing what they were exposed to, the dangers, of course, the poachers, armed poachers crossing international borders using heavy caliber rifles, automatic weapons. There's that. The biggest danger they face is the very animals they're trying to protect. Elephants, lions, leopards, buffalo. These rangers are dressed the same as what a poacher would wear, carrying the same thing in their hands. So how's an animal going to differentiate between the person who's risking their life to save them and the person that's risking their life to kill them? So there was something there that sparked more inquiry from my side, not just inquiry about what's going on with these rangers, but more inquiry about who are you, Damien, and what's your purpose?
Interesting. And I guess it's for people listening and watching who obviously know that poaching is a real massive problem, but they may not know the scale, the intricacy, the skill sets, the sophistication of some of these. Just give us a sense of how these guys operate.
Yeah, so the illegal trafficking of wildlife, it's not isolated to Africa. It's one of the largest criminal industries in the world. And these wildlife animals or these wild animals and their products are like dollar signs for illicit trade, for organised crime, alongside guns, drugs, human trafficking, counterfeiting money, wildlife products are just another currency to be exploited. And so, we're going up against some quite large and well-connected organised crime networks that operate not only across the continent, but from a transnational crime perspective.
Wow.
So a lot of what we see being killed on the ground here is ending up on the table or on someone's desk on the other side of the world, often in Southeast Asia. Not to want to, try and be, point the finger, but that's the truth. If we're looking at some of the hardest animals to protect, being elephant and rhino on this continent, because of the value of the elephant's tusk or the rhino's horn, you've got something that should be locked up in a safe running around an area that is hundreds of miles wide, and you're trying to protect that asset, and those assets are desperately wanted in countries like China, Vietnam, Hong Kong, Singapore, Malaysia. This is another currency, and when those run out, they become too less. There's something else waiting right behind them to take their place.
So these guys are well-funded, well-connected, organized, motivated, and I guess what I'm trying to get is, like, you helping the Rangers or get involved in this fighting these guys here compared to maybe fighting the enemy in Iraq that you were fighting in Iraq. How would you compare the battle, the war? How would you compare? Are they more like slippery, kind of like, very elusive kind of people, or how would you compare the two sort of theaters where you're operating?
Well, fortunately, so far, touch wood, no one's been able to shoot straight enough. Almost. I had one go through the hair, but
really?
Oh my God. It's look, I will say, both in Iraq, in terms of standing up an insurgency, they're brilliant at running an insurgency, and guerrilla operations, and what we're dealing with over here is also is a low level guerrilla operation. The poachers move amongst the community. One minute they're a poacher, the next minute the rifle is hidden under a log, and they're pushing a wheelbarrow down the street. And it comes down to how do you determine that person's a poacher, and that is being able to have good relationships with the communities to be able to extract good information from them. That's a whole other story I'll get into later. But look, the poachers that we're dealing with, these guys will easy walk 100 kilometers in a day. And they'll do it with no water. They'll be in the bush sometimes for a week at a time, sometimes longer. They'll come in, they'll kill a bunch of elephants, cache the ivory as they're going along, and then walk back out. These guys are sleeping under the stars in lion, leopard, buffalo, and elephant-infested forests across the continent. They are masters at what they do. They are plugged into nature, every sight, sound, smell. They are masters at tracking. Tracking is a perfect combination of art and science. The science is when you're looking at sticks and broken bits of grass or dust that's kicked off, or a footprint that's 6 hours old versus a footprint that's 12 hours old. The art is when you're no longer looking at the signs, you're inside the mind of what it is you're trying to hunt. You're not going where it is, you're going where it's going to be. And that's what these guys are brilliant at. They're brilliant at dropping in and being a part of that ecosystem.
Jeez. And so that led to you, I guess, one of the things you're most well known for is the International Anti-Poaching Foundation, as well as the Akashinga program. I guess that was the next sort of phase of your commitment to this cause in some ways. And just walk us through briefly those programs. Yeah,
absolutely. So, look, came over, saw what was happening with animals, saw what was happening with the rangers that were trying to defend those animals, and decided I wanted to do something about it. I think, everyone looks for a catalyst moment. I think for me, the catalyst was the previous decade just building up and, being part of a system that, we're in Iraq protecting resources in the ground and dotted lines on a map, not necessarily there for some sort of higher calling. I don't care what anyone's got to say.
Yeah.
That's what it felt like, being a little bit older, a little bit wiser, and being able to look back on your time there. I don't regret it. I did well financially there, and I was now in a position to do something with those finances. And it wasn't buying cars and more houses. It was, out patrolling with the rangers in Zimbabwe and seeing a buffalo caught in a wire snare. Now, not to be confused with a water buffalo. This is a Cape buffalo. So this is an animal that looks at you like you owe it money. It is one of the most dangerous animals on the African savanna. And here we saw one of these big, majestic animals with her back foot caught in a wire snare, these wire nooses that poachers hang over all the paths, along the rivers, wherever the animals walk. You see all these sort of footpaths. If you ever fly over the bush, you see all these paths zigzagging through the canopy, and that's where these poachers target with hundreds of these traps, trying to get meat on a commercial scale. And we saw one of these buffaloes, and as we got close, you remember I was talking about how the poachers, the tracking skills of the rangers, of course, also have this, and they read the ground the same way we would read the front page of a newspaper. It's a direct update on what is going on in this situation, and they can look at the footprints and determine how long this has been going on for. Now, Orpheus, the head ranger, he came back after going up close, and he said she's been there for 3 days, and then she couldn't get away from there. She was trapped, so it was safe to move up within a certain distance. When we got up, we could hear bones under her skin grinding, broken bones, and she'd ripped her own pelvis in half, trying to pull that leg out from that wire snare. They have hooves. They don't have hands like us. They can't comprehend what this foreign body is that's stopping their leg from moving. And we had no choice but to euthanize her. And when she was euthanized, she started giving birth to a stillborn calf. And that was
God.
Yeah, that was I suppose a catalyst moment, or it was the final catalyst moment out of hundreds that had happened every day, every month, at the time, but also looking back and piecing it together. And so when I was in Iraq, my mum had power of attorney over my estate and affairs for obvious reasons. And I just contacted mum and I said, start selling shit off. And she sold it all. A burn the boats mentality, left myself with no option but to make something work, and had no idea what I was doing. I just knew that I had a couple of things in this world that could perhaps make a difference for these animals. That was a niche skill set in an environment where animals were being hunted in a way that needed those kinds of skill sets to be trained to the rangers to help defend them. And I had some bucks, some cash. So, give it a shot. I actually wanted to be a chef. Watched Anthony Bourdain one day on an Emirates flight to Dubai before heading into Iraq. I thought, this is great. You just walk around some foreign country and, smell something cooking over the back fence and jump over and have a few cups of grappa with the grandmother and get the recipe and make a TV show. But it's obviously a lot different. So that was that.
Brilliant. Fantastic. And then, so that then evolved. I don't know when Akashinga evolved after the IAPF stuff, was it? And I think that's a real, I watched the fantastic Nat Geo short doc, which I really encourage listeners to go and check out because it's fantastic. But that's a real unique take on how to, a solution to this kind of problem. And how did that all come about?
So, look, my early, let's say the first 7 years of conservation, it was a good guy with a gun going out there trying to be in between the animal that's being hunted and the person that's doing the hunting. And that's the drinking straw that I looked through at the situation without really getting a full 360. And, as you go along, you start to realize that, we're stopping a problem, but it's almost like a paramedic stopping the hemorrhaging of a situation, trying to get that situation to the operating table. We didn't know what the actual disease was that we were trying to cure. We were just trying to deal with the symptoms. And then did a big operation for a number of years along the border of Kruger National Park. So it was home to about a third of the world's remaining rhinoceros at the time. It was ground zero, where most rhinos that were being killed on the planet were being killed in this section of southern Kruger National Park, which is on the South African side of the border. So we went into Mozambique, which is where there's about 3/4 of the poachers and the syndicates that were operating in Kruger were coming across the border from Mozambique. And we went in there and we set up this big operation, helicopters, aircraft, ground level offensive against the local population of these syndicates. And, we got down to business, and it was a bloody, like a war zone at times.
Wow.
At any time, in any one day, there'd be 11 armed units crossing through that area into Kruger National Park, willing to kill rangers or any animal, any rhino they came across. So, that's, we met force with force, and you're going out into the communities armed because you can't just drive around out there any other way. You're in hostile territory. The people that live all along the boundary of these areas we're trying to protect, we're hostile against conservation. We're looking into the eyes of mothers or sisters or wives that have lost a husband, a brother, a son, a nephew, an uncle. And we're trying to have this hearts and minds conversation about what is it you guys want to see here to be motivated to give a shit about plants and trees and animals. And it was just, this is on a continent that's going to have 2 billion people by 2040. And it's not going to be bigger fences and more guns that solve the problem we have here. Conservation is a social issue. And when we have social impact, we'll have a conservation outcome. And I just didn't know how to have the greatest level of social impact that can motivate these communities to care about looking after rhinos and trees and everything else.
Crazy. So I would love to touch on the Akashinga, if you don't mind, just in terms of the way that you approach that, because it is slightly different. You might think you go into a place, you get a group of rangers, train them up, send them out there. I mean, how did Akashinga differ from the other sort of projects?
Yeah. So that Mozambique project was sort of, a turning point for us in trying to figure out the best way to have social impact. And we found an overwhelming body of evidence that said empowering women was the single greatest force for change in Africa. We were going round as an organization, round and round, trying to figure out how we might do this. I approached 7 different places across 3 countries to try and get an all-female team or even an all-female 4-person patrol into the mix, and nobody wanted to take that risk. And we're still umming and ahhing on whether we were going to trial an all-female anti-poaching unit, armed, trained to go out there and be on the front lines of conservation. And I think I was in New York, and I read an article in the New York Times about the US Army Rangers training women for frontline deployment. And about a decade before reading that article, we'd been rescued by the US Army Rangers in northern Baghdad from a bit of a bust up there that we got ourselves into. And reading that article, I thought if the unit that was good and gracious enough to save our lives in northern Baghdad that day back in 2007, if they're now training women to be Army Rangers, we're going to train them to be wildlife rangers. And that was the beginning of this program. We set out to we found an abandoned trophy hunting reserve in Zimbabwe, and we went and spoke with the chief, spoke with local government. We said, we want to set up this all-female anti-poaching unit here and see where it goes. The initial women that came down, because when I arrived in Zimbabwe, it had the lowest life expectancy in the world for a woman. So we thought, when we start this program, let's create opportunities for those that deserve it the most. And so they were all survivors of sexual assault, domestic violence, AIDS orphans, single mothers, abandoned wives. And of course, we didn't realize with that we were getting the toughest in society. And that became the beginning of this program. I think over the following 7 years, I grew that into, with the team, we grew that into one of the largest conservation portfolios on the continent. A staff of almost 1,000. And a different model of conservation for organizations and governments to adopt by centralizing social impact around the empowerment of women to achieve conservation outcomes at scale. We went from being inside these wilderness areas, looking out, like almost being like in the castle, and then like, how do we defend the walls of the castle? And that castle was a preserve for us. We weren't going out into the kingdom. And then with when we shifted the narrative to working with women naturally de-escalated a lot of the tension that historically existed between communities and conservation. They rebuilt a broken bridge between the two entities. There was a distinct lack of corruption with the women as well. So all of this, it started going from being inside the castle, looking out over the walls, to, all of a sudden we were out in the communities at a household level, shoulder to shoulder with the communities that started to see what these women were doing with their salaries. They were starting to see rangers, these women on patrol that weren't using their gun as an extension of ego. It was a tool to do a job. They weren't using excessive force to get their job done, and they weren't being corrupted in their day-to-day activities. We need to get the human side right. And if you get the human side right, you are almost home in whatever it is you're trying to achieve. And these women, they became the golden thread behind this, an ever-shifting and invisible formula that allowed us to succeed on a daily basis. We need a sledgehammer every now and then to kick a wall down or kick a door in and go in and get the bad guy. 99.9% of the rest of the time, we just need good relationships, good community-based policing. If you get that right, you're so close to getting it all resolved.
Fantastic. So on this show, we'll have guests to come on and share what we call the No Ordinary Monday story. It's a sort of particular experience that you might have to sort of recount as a story. And I can't even imagine how many stories you might have to choose from. But what's the sort of big one that comes to mind?
Jeez. There's a few. There's a few wildlife ones. Pissed on by a black rhino that I thought was about to kill me, being chased by a lion up a tree, being charged by elephants and buffalo.
Oh, jeez.
This is for a guy that grew up in Australia, actually. So with kangaroos and possums. So everything in Africa feels like it's trying to kill you. And I know everyone that goes to Australia feels that.
I was going to say.
Step off the plane and there's going to be a spider jumping up or a snake crawling up.
Got to watch those drop bears, man. You got to watch those drop bears.
Look, I mean, there's crazy stuff going on all the time, for better or worse. I suppose, we do a lot of undercover work, wildlife crime investigations, infiltrating organized crime networks, trying to get in front of the curve, get the weapons and the criminals before they're killing animals. Usually involves a lot of dealing or trying to intercept deals with ivory and rhino horn. If people are selling that, live pangolin as well. I remember it was a few years ago, we're doing a live operation with trying to get rhino horn and ivory from this poaching syndicate. And these guys are involved with a bunch of other bad shit as well. And they went to do the deal, and it fell through and turned into a car chase. And then these guys were shooting. Anyway, so our guys returned fire, shot the wheels out. The other guys eventually surrendered. They get over to the car and they see all the ivory and the rhino horn. It's fake. Okay, and then there's this big white bucket there. Okay, so these guys are trying to deal in like thousands of bucks worth of fake shit. And the Sangomas, or the witch doctors here, they have these little tiny mice that they use as part of their ceremonies. And there's like long-haired little things there. They exist over near the border of Zimbabwe and Mozambique. They're very hard to find. They're worth a lot of money for these people. They help people see into the future, and if that's what you want to believe. Anyway, these guys believe it. That's all that matters. And anyway, so inside the bucket is one of these mice. And so this mice, all the rhino horns fake, all the ivory's fake, but this mouse is real. But it's not a real one of these mice. These guys have got a hot glue gun, this poor little thing, and they've cut off a bunch of long hair from a cow's tail, and they've stuck all these blobs of glue all over this mouse. They're trying to sell this mouse for X amount of dollars. So, you know, these guys get arrested, the ivory and all that gets burnt because it's fake. And this mouse gets taken into a wildlife refuge. And I couldn't help but thinking it's probably the only mouse in history that's been rescued in the middle of a shootout, come out alive. So it's a unique one, but you cannot make up some of the shit that we get dealt with on a daily basis. It's great. Yeah.
Unbelievable. That story that I think it was the Kruger Mozambique one. Are you able to walk us through that one? Because that's one that you were actually on the ground for, right?
Yeah, I mean, there was, you know, the Coromana, the small town there on the edge, you know, that place had its own cemetery for poachers.
Oh, jeez.
You know, it's on the ground there. It's a war zone. Bodies coming back across the border from South Africa, you know, in there trying to kill rhinos. Helicopters buzzing around, landing on the carcasses of rhinos, doing post-mortem, getting the bullets out, getting the ballistics, seeing the sadness in rangers who spend every waking minute trying to defend these animals. They've got to be right at the time. Poachers have got to be right once. Look, there's no winners. There's no winners in a situation like that. And again, it's those situations like that keep you up at night, that make you try and come up with something better. And you know, where we're at the moment, I'm working now back to back with my wife. We've got around 10 million acres of wilderness, the mandate to help protect across 5 countries. 10 million acres is larger than all the national parks in the United States combined in the lower 48 states. So it's a hell of a lot of responsibility, a hell of a lot of land. The only way we're going to do it is by getting the people, the communities that live within and alongside these areas to see that the long-term preservation of nature is going to be more important than food on the table tonight. So that's why our models that we work across these areas, social impact through the creation of jobs, healthcare, education, clean water, infrastructure development, and then on the inside of the reserves, being able to do the anti-poaching, the investigations, the firefighting, the data management and collection, and getting all of these aspects of the formula, of the model, to be able to speak to each other and leverage off each other component. So we're not doing things in isolation. If we turn the dial up here and we refurbish a clinic or build a school, we can see that there's a direct positive spike with the relationship with those communities. And subsequently, they don't come in and chop down trees. They don't come in and poach the animals, because they see that the social impact is linked to biodiversity outcomes. I don't know what all the answers are. But, you know, this is our dance space as an organisation. I want to be able to sit back at the end of it all and say, help play a part in protecting as much of the natural world as possible. And since I was 19, I've been pulling every lesson possible, and a lot of those lessons coming from some really hard failures, pulling all of those lessons into what we do on a daily basis to make sure that our teams are doing exactly that, helping to protect as much of the natural world as possible.
Have you had some tough days or sleepless nights during the sort of journey you've had? Like, I don't know if you've had, you mentioned at the beginning, you know, someone's been shot or something like that by poachers or in some kind of gunfight. What have been some of the tougher days? Yeah,
look, it's you know, a tough day can be, you know, from a government standpoint, from a contractual standpoint, it can be a delay, it can be losing a big donor, it can be, you know, a project taking a turn, an organisation taking a turn, it can be an allegation. You know, we're dealing with criminals that have been busted doing something they shouldn't be doing, and then all of a sudden they say, oh, you know, someone planted an ivory tusk in the trunk of your car, and you know, you're getting dragged through the courts. It's not fucking easy. It's not meant to be, and if it was easy, there'd be a lot more people doing it. You know, and this is it's the thick skin that you've got to build up over the years, and it's exactly what's happened. shit that used to keep me awake a decade ago doesn't, it's water off a duck's back now. It doesn't still mean that all these little things aren't important. But essentially, if it's not drowning, bleeding out, or burning, it can fucking wait till tomorrow.
Yeah. And you've had that, I'm guessing. It has been tough when it comes. Have you lost anyone Rangers-wise during the sort of time you have?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, we have. Yeah. I mean, a very tough incident was losing 3 in 1 during a river crossing, drowning. So, yeah. And
so that wasn't even engaging with poachers. That was just in the line of duty kind of thing.
As I said at the beginning, the toughest part is the very areas they're trying to protect. Nature itself doesn't necessarily forgive, and that's one aspect that just makes you take your hat off to rangers around the world. And some countries they're called scouts or rangers or wildlife officers, whatever they may be. They are out there right now while we're sitting here having this conversation. They are out there risking their life on behalf of a global community to defend something that's worth fighting for. Are we going to be the generation that defines our failure as a species? What are our kids going to say when they look back upon the future that they've inherited? Dad, Mum, what have you guys left us? I want to be able to turn around and say it was a bit better when we handed it over than when we received it.
That was going to be my next question: is how do we leave this on a hopeful note, kind of thing? The scale of the problem is massive, and it's not just Africa. It is a global problem of not just poaching, but human-animal conflict and deforestation and all this kind of stuff. Like, given all that, and seeing as you are the heart of all this work, if your kids were running up to you saying, Mum and Dad, how do we stay optimistic? Are you guys optimistic about the future?
Absolutely, mate. I've had my time of that fatalist mindset, like, fuck, what's it all for? I love a fucking good fight, believe it or not, and we certainly have one in front of us here. So I'm in it, mate. I'm on the right side of history, and I'm going for it. We're all going for it because I believe there's something worth fighting for.
Nice. And anyone listening, I always like to provide, any advice, practical advice, or any other kind of advice for anyone who wants to follow in your footsteps.
Yeah, absolutely. Find something good and just go for it. Do one good thing that will lead to the next good thing. And just keep it in your mindset. Like whether we're a lawyer, a teacher, a paramedic, a nurse, a ranger, there's stuff all day long, every day in our lives where we can make a difference for nature or make a difference for animals. And it's not going to be a matter of, nature should have to pay to stay. It's going to be what's the bill going to be if we don't look after it now? What corner are we painting ourselves into as a global community? So this is not going to be an if, it's going to be a when. We actually all have to sit up and take notice. And just because the water isn't lapping at all our back doorsteps at the moment with climate crisis, this crisis is coming. It's going to be something that we deal with increasingly in our lifetimes, and our children will inherit to deal with. So we better get the systems in place now, and those systems are on everybody's shoulders.
There was something in another interview you did which really blew my mind, which was you had a big rundown of philanthropic money that's sort of given out to different causes each year. Yeah. It was under $1 trillion. I can't remember how much it was. It was hundreds of billions of dollars. Yeah. And just tell us how, you may not remember the exact numbers, but I know it was a pretty staggering number that was actually given to the natural world.
Yeah. So, and I love to speak about this because it shows that where our mindset is as a species. So the biggest philanthropic market in the world is the United States. And it's about $500 billion a year that's given to philanthropy there each year. So at the top, like the biggest bracket where most of that money goes is religion. So just under a third of every dollar that gets spent goes to a religion. So we're trying to, put the money in if we can behave like a fucking naughty little prick during the week, put the money in the tray on the weekend, and maybe we go somewhere when it's all over. I want to deal with shit that I can see, like the miracle that's all around me right now, sitting here in the middle of nature. That shit I can see. That shit I want to look after right now. No offense to religion. I still believe in someone bigger upstairs. But, I want to deal with this problem, not where I'm going to maybe end up for eternity. Right down the bottom of that scale, we have the smallest bracket, which is broken up into animals, domestic and wild, local and international, and the environment, all of nature. So that's 3% of all funding that's given. We come back up the chart a little bit. You get collectively healthcare and education makes up about 24% of the market space. So that's 8 times the market space just for healthcare and education. So when we flipped our model and started working in the communities to try and achieve conservation outcomes, we landed in the middle of some of these bigger brackets that allowed us to raise more funds and grow the organisation.
Nice.
But it does give you a snapshot of the human psyche.
Would you say that's probably one of the biggest, if you're trying to put a message out there into the world, one of the biggest challenges you might face is just getting everyone to recognize what we recognize, which is, we need to be doing more to protect the natural spaces, because ultimately, if we let out all that stuff go, we're the ones that are going to suffer from it.
Yeah, it is. Humans are, as a collective, we're capable of amazing things when we realize we're painted right up into the corner. I just don't think we realize how far into the corner we are at the moment. Time will tell. Absolutely, we need to do more. For me, it's also about animals, justice for animals. How do you create that? You help create some of the biggest spaces where they can roam and do what they want to do. They want to live. They're like us. They want to live. They want to build family structures. They want to have safety and security. They're born into a world they can never understand. They don't want a car, a paycheck, a house. They don't have egos like us. They just want to live. And we like to take that away from them. And so, we might not save the whole world today, but we can save these ecosystems and give those animals a chance.
Fantastic, Damien. I mean, I always love to end with just giving you the opportunity to, tell the world where to find you, if they want to contribute or get involved. What would you like to tell everybody?
Yeah, beautiful. Thanks, Chris. Abundant Village. So www.abundantvillage.world. Get on there, have a look at all the projects we're doing across Southern and East Africa. You'll get to see some of the teams that's on the website and just learn more about community-led conservation and being able to do it at scale. Grateful for the opportunity, the platform to speak about who we are and what we do. And of course, I know you've got my amazing wife, Brianna, that's going to come on the show as well. So our wonderful CEO and my soulmate life partner. Yeah.
I can't wait to share that episode as well. So listen, Damien, it's been absolutely amazing speaking with you, and I really hope that people get involved and check you out and donate if they can.
Chris, you're a gentleman. Thanks very much, mate.
And that's a wrap on today's episode. Huge thanks again to Damien for coming on the show and sharing his amazing stories with us. And of course, huge thanks to you all for listening and supporting this podcast as well. You can find out more about Damien and Brianna's work via the links in the show notes or by heading to abundantvillage.world. Now, for audio listeners, these episodes are also available on YouTube, where you'll find clips and visuals from all these stories. Those visuals will also be shared across our socials. We are No Ordinary Monday Podcast on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and LinkedIn. And for everything else, head to noordinarymonday.com. Next week on the show, we sit down with Robin Dreek, a former FBI agent who spent over 2 decades recruiting spies, running counterintelligence operations, and leading a behavioral analysis team. Now, on the morning of September 11th, 2001, he was in New York City. He watched people jump from the North Tower, and an engine from one of the planes landed just 30 feet from his car. And in the weeks that followed, with the weight of the entire country on his shoulders, he had to figure out how to get informants to trust him with information and with their lives. Join us next week for his amazing story. Now, if you enjoyed today's episode, there are 4 simple ways that you can support the show. Number 1, follow or subscribe on your podcast app. Number 2, leave us a quick rating or short review. Number 3, share the episode with a friend, a colleague, or maybe a family member. And then number 4, support the show at buymeacoffee.com/NoOrdinaryMonday. If you do any one of these things, it just really helps us keep the podcast independent. We can avoid adverts and allows me to keep bringing you amazing guests and stories each week. And that's it for this episode. This podcast is independently produced, hosted, and edited by me, Chris Barron. Thank you so much for listening. Take care, and we'll see you next Monday.